All right. So, friends, good morning and welcome to our regular SMS Saturday morning sessions. And with us, we have our own member, very beloved Shankar Narayanji. And today we are going to talk about time of supply. Now, the fundamental thing for GST is supply. But just because if there is a supply, there should also be a time at which this has to be discharged. And does time of supply indicate that the supply happened at that time, or that liability to discharge, irrespective whenever the supply happened, is the time of supply? So, to discuss all these points with us, we have Shankar Narayanji. And though most of us know, it's my duty and also privilege to introduce Shankar Narayan sir. Firstly, Shankar Narayan sir is the member of GST study group of ICI. He is also a master trainer for ICI and has conducted many training sessions. More than 6,000 chartered accountants, and on the corporates, more than 12,000 corporates have attended his session. He is also a member for Governing Council on International Chamber of GST Professionals, IGSTP. He is an Indirect Taxes Committee member for Hindustan Chamber of Commerce and Madras Chamber of Commerce. He has authored and reviewed publications on SENVAT, GST, and under the guidance of ICI, many publications which were released, he was part of it. Apart from ICI, he also takes sessions in Cost Institute, Company Secretary Institute, NASIN, Commercial Tax for Tamil Nadu, and other places. He is the founder partner in GPVSV and Associates, firm present in Chennai and Bangalore, predominantly handling indirect taxes compliance. With this brief introduction, I bring Shankar Narayan sir to the stage. And sir, it's all over to you.
Thank you, Vin. And good morning to all the fellow faculties.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I'm all set. Just give me a minute. I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So time of supply.
It's visible, sir.
Yes. Time of supply is what we'll be discussing, harboring around sections 12, 13, and 14. Now, to set the context, where are we? Where were we initially? And especially people like me who started in Central Excise. Now, earlier to Central Excise, we had ModVat. So the ModVat days is what I recollect whenever I think about time of supply. Because there was a time in the ModVat days, that is modified value added tax, when in a manufacturing setup, just outside the factory, there will be an inspector of Central Excise will be sitting. Every vehicle that is leaving the factory will be inspected by them, and they have to show the proof of payment of tax challan. So we have had instances where people will run to the bank evening by say 4:35 to ensure that that night clearances can be done only when the challans are paid. That was the time of supply in Central Excise prior to 2000. So that is how tax was being collected. Venuji also touched upon this by saying that, am I becoming liable at that point of time, or is the supply happening at that point of time? Now, the liability fixation is what happens with the time of supply provision. So what the law intends to do here is, at that point, you have become liable to pay tax, is what they are trying to fix. Slowly, the time of supply concept emerged. And then later on, when in the year 2000 and post that, the amendments were done in Central Excise to bring about the concept of time of supply by saying that you have become liable on a particular day, but it is not necessary that you have to pay the tax on the same day. Then only I'll make you clearance. No, not necessary. You can pay it on a appointed day. That appointed day was 6th of the following month. And then they said by 10th of the following month, you please file your returns. Now, this is how slowly this has emerged with respect to goods. So the time of supply tells us when I have become liable, whereas it is completely different from a due date. The due date is the time when I am expected to make the payment to the department for all the time of supplies that have occurred in the period for which I am liable to make the return. For instance, whole of January month, I could have done multiple supplies. The time of supplies would have occurred in January month, right from 1st to 31st. But my liability to pay to the department would arise only by 20th of February. The reason being that is the due date. But has my liability started on day one? Yes, my liability has started from 1st January to 31st January. But the government, for the sake of ease as well as assessment, appoints for this period 20th of the following month as the due date if you are going to be covered under the relevant provisions of section 39. Okay. This is with respect to goods where we started. And when we discuss about services, it is even more complicated, or it has gone through a rugged route is what I would say. Way back in 2007, 8, 9 and all, what used to happen is people will take advances and never pay service tax on that. The reason being, advances only when is taken for the purpose of a service, we need to prove and pay service tax. So this was going on rampantly till 2011. In service tax, the concept of time of supply was introduced by way of this POT, the point of taxation rules in 2011. That is when the concept of time of supply also came into this levy of service tax. So we had central excise on which daily taxes were being paid, slowly emerging into a concept of monthly payment, and service tax where there was no time of supply at all. It was only based upon the invoice. And that also had to come in line in 2011 into this concept of time of supply. And now we have a evolved version of these two in the form of section 12 for identifying the time of supply in case of goods, and section 13 for identifying the time of supply in case of services. So this is to get an overall idea of what we are venturing into. And then of course there is section 14, which we will discuss towards the end of today's session if possible. Now on to time of supply of goods. Both in case of time of supply of goods as well as services, there are 6 subsections which are aligned, in which I would start off with subsection 2 of both section 12 and section 13 individually. What are they trying to convey? Now, there are 2 instances where, one, I am liable to pay tax, but it is not my outward supply. I am liable to pay tax when it is my outward supply. So in other words, or in simple terms, forward charge liability. When I am liable to pay tax on my outward supply, if it is goods, 12 subsection 2 has to be looked into. If it is services, 13 subsection 2 has to be looked into to identify when I actually become liable to pay the tax to the department, depending upon whether I am supplying goods or service, 12 or 13 subsection 2. The second possibility, when I become liable to pay GST under reverse charge. That is when, if in case of goods, the notified goods as it stands today, 9 subsection 3, or in case of services, notified services on which I am liable to pay GST under reverse charge, 12 subsection 3 for goods and 13 subsection 3 for services lets us know as to when I actually become liable to pay reverse charge. So these 2 subsections are very critical for us to understand time of supply provisions, and these 2, if it is covered, most of the scenarios would be covered. With that in context, 12 subsection 2, what does it talk about? It says the time of supply shall be earlier of the following, which is the date of issue of invoice or the date on which the supplier receives the payment is what was initially told. And we all know, in case of goods, from 15th November 2017 by way of notification number 66/2017 CGST, the date of receipt of payment was done away. So 12 subsection 2 clause B was done away. So in effect, as it stands today, it is only the date on which invoice should have been raised as per section 31. Based on that only, the time of supply would occur in case of supply of goods. For this, I also need to touch upon section 31, which I will do superficially because there might be a separate discussion on those sections. But for the moment, in case of supply of goods, when am I supposed to raise invoice? It can be on or before removal of the goods for the purpose of making the supply. That is when the invoice is supposed to be issued. So just to quickly refer to section 31 as well, which says a registered person shall before or at the time of removal of goods for supply to the recipient, where it involves movement of goods or the delivery of goods in any other case, shall issue a tax invoice. This is critical because unless otherwise allowed by section 31, I cannot do a movement using a delivery challan for the purpose of making a supply. That will create another issue from a time of supply perspective, because I should have raised invoice at that time, because many transactions people have started doing, saying that I will move the goods using a delivery challan. Once my customer says yes, then I will raise a invoice. But ideally, when I should have raised an invoice, the invoice ought to have been raised when the removal happens. And there are instances where it is allowed, like sale or return basis, specifically where it is allowed in case of gaseous substances when it is being supplied. Only in those scenarios, invoice could be raised after the goods have started the movement or once it reaches the customer premises. But in all the other cases, ideally, as per law, on removal, the invoice should have been raised. Now, that date on which the invoice should have been raised is pegged to section 12 subsection 2, and that date will be taken as the time of supply in case of goods. Whereas the mirror image of the similar provision in case of services, what happens in case of services? We can look at 13 subsection 2. The time of supply of services shall be the earliest of the following dates. Now, this is something which we are all used to in all the taxation provisions, where it goes about the earliest of the dates or whichever is lower. A similar analogy is put in use in 13 subsection 2. The three dates that are in contention in 13 subsection 2 are: one, the date on which the service is provided or when it is completed is taken into consideration, and then the date of issue of invoice, and then the date of receipt of payment. So in case of determining the time of supply for the purpose of services, we are supposed to go through these three dates to arrive at the time of supply. And in case of services, it is a little complicated as well, because there is a concept in services called as the continuous supply of services. Section 2, subsection 33 defines what is a continuous supply of service, which says that any service which is being rendered for a period more than 3 months would come under the category of continuous supply of services. And that is what we get to see in case of most of the works contract transactions or any such even renting transactions, where the service is being rendered as per the contract for more than a continuous period of 3 months. Now, this read with section 31 is what leads to a lot of interesting interpretations as well as legal issues. Let's start at the basic point. Now, 3 dates are with us. 1, the date of provision of service, or in other words, the date of completion of service. 2, the date of invoice. 3, the date of receipt of payment. And as we all know, section 31, as I said earlier, I am not getting deeper into it, superficially touching upon that section. In case of services, except the specific services, like in case of insurance or banking, in case of all the other services, from the date the service is completed, the invoice is supposed to be issued within 30 days. So the time limit that is given to me from the date of completion to the date of issue of invoice has to be that 30 days time. If I exceed that 30 days time, then I will not be able to take cover under that extended time. My time of supply will become my original date of completion of service. So I need to ensure that the invoice is issued within 30 days from the date of completion of service. So step 1 will be compare the date of completion of service with the date of raising of invoice, the 30 days time limit or 45 days time limit as it is applicable. And then from on, arrive at which is the first point of comparison. So either the date of completion of service will emerge if the invoice is belatedly issued beyond the 30 days or 45 days time, or if the invoice is issued well within the 30 days or 45 days time, that invoice date will come up for comparison with the date of receipt of payment. This is where I think advances have been rightfully brought under the liability to pay tax. Now here, it is very critical because in case of goods, 12(2)(b) has been done away with. Hence, there is no question of tax payment on advances which are received for the purpose of goods. But as it was done in point of taxation rules in the erstwhile service tax regime, it continues to flow into the GST regime as well, wherein it is clear that in case of services, the advance received is liable for tax payment. Now, the advance received and on which tax is paid, will it become a tax levy is another question, because it is only a tax which is collected on the advance. There could be a scenario where there is no supply fructified against that advance. Take for instance, we had a scenario where 22 crores of contract was agreed upon, the project was taken up, and then the advance was taken, on the advance GST was paid. But it so happened that there were a lot of protests and the whole project could not take off. So the main contractor returned the money to the had to return the money to the customer, and then all the subcontractors had to return the money to the main contractor. So what happened is, we had already taken the provisions of 13 subsection 2, and when we received an advance of, let's say, 1 crore, we had paid a GST of 18% on that. Now we had to give back the whole money, that is whatever I have received from my customer, 1 crore plus 18 lakhs, we had to give it back to him. When I gave back to them, what is the relief for me? Because I've already paid 18 lakhs of GST on this. Now I think this is where 13 subsection 2 has a direct connection with 54 subsection 8. In 54 subsection 8, in case of refunds, 5 listed scenarios are there, and then there is, of course, room for any other scenario that being added in future. In 54(8), clause C, if I am right, it is mentioned that when there is no supply that had happened, and due to which the money is being refunded, then the unjust enrichment check need not happen, and the money can be directly credited to the person who is applying for refund rather than being credited to the consumer welfare fund. Now that is arising only because of this taxation methodology. How do I say that? When I receive advance, I pay tax on advance. Why do I do that? 13 subsection 2 is telling me that. So I am paying the tax, but am I paying the tax on a supply, on a levy? No, I am paying it on compliance with the procedural provisions of section 13, which tells me that you pay whenever you receive advance. Because if you don't receive an advance, you raise an invoice first, then you pay it on the tax at the time you raise the invoice. But when I raise an invoice, what happens? In case of services, as per the explanation which one would be able to see after 13 subsection 2, that the time when you raise an invoice, it is considered that the services have been rendered. So when that happens, when the service is considered to be completed to the extent it is covered by the invoice, explanation 1 that you can see in your screen, as per that, if I raise an invoice, it is said to be complete. But on the other hand, if I am receiving an advance first, but not raising an invoice, and that is where I think the distinction is brought about by telling us, one, procedurally, you pay the tax, but also at the same time, under the provisions of records and registers, it is being told that we have to raise a advance receipt voucher to make the payment of that tax. So that tax which is being paid as an advance reported in table 11 capital A of GSTR 1 is not a tax that is paid against a transaction or a supply on which a taxable event has occurred. There is no taxable event has occurred so far, but we are paying it to ensure that the provisions of 13.2 are complied with. So we are paying tax on advance using an advance receipt voucher. Same way, when we are undoing the transaction, that is, the transaction is not happening, so the money is being refunded. For that, this is the precise reason why a refund voucher has been given as a document to be raised. When that refund voucher is raised, the tax that is already paid to the government is actually claimed back by the taxpayer. Now, how do I claim it back? We have to show it in the returns as the money that is to be adjusted or that is eligible to be adjusted. Suppose if you have liability to cover that money in the month in which you are adjusting, then to that extent your tax is considered to be paid for that month. You don't have to worry about it. But we have had scenarios where I would have received advance, I have paid a tax on advance, but in the month in which I want to do adjustment, I have paid the money back to my customer, but I don't have any liability. I cannot report negative amounts in GSTR 3B. Now, those are the scenarios where we apply for refund, and under 54(8)(c), we will be able to get the refund fully. So when I raise an invoice, the service is considered to be completed to that extent of invoice. Can I raise a credit note against that for the full value? Certainly not possible. Service rendered cannot be taken back. But on the other hand, if I issue an advance receipt voucher and pay the tax to the government, and when I subsequently receive the money, rather when I subsequently pay back the money as refund, I'll be able to get the tax paid on the advance back from the department. So 13.2, 34 read with
Shankar sir, your voice is not coming. Shankar sir. Friends, maybe technical glitch.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir. You are audible now.
Yeah, audible. Yeah. Sorry, one moment. Okay. So the connection between 13.2, 34 and 54.8 is what I wanted to establish through this combination. Now, there are two more elements which I wanted to discuss in this context. The one is continuous supply of service, and how does it fit in within 13 subsection 2. Now here, as you can see in my screen, there is an amendment that I also wanted to highlight, which I have shown here. Earlier in the original provisions of GST, that is as it came through in 1st July 2017, one could see that in case of services, they would have mentioned subsection 1 of section 31. That is what was the original provision. So it was mentioned as, subsection 2 of section 31, because 31 subsection 1 belong to goods. So 31 subsection 2 is what they mentioned. But later on, they realized, or the gap was filled by realizing that 31 subsection 2 is dealing with services, but on the other hand, 31 subsection 5 plays a major role in case of services. Because in case of services, continuous supply of service, especially the works contract related services, when it becomes a continuous supply of service, there is no question of completion of service and then only raising an invoice. Point number 1. And point number 2, there is no completion means then where is the question of 30 days? So this created an anomaly. To address that anomaly, they have simply removed the words subsection 2 and said the invoice should be issued within the prescribed time under section 31. So for the purpose of continuous supply of service, I think there is no relevance of the date of provision of service. We need to consider section 31 subsection 5 only. And if invoice is raised at that time as mentioned in 31.5. To give a smaller introduction to 31.5, it talks about 3 possible scenarios in case of continuous supply of service. Let us all assume that it is a works contract continuously going on for a couple of years. In that case, what they are saying is, okay, the contract itself has got a due date for payment. Let's go by the due date. I saw there was a question also from Venuji on the continuous supply of service in case of 11 months rental. The answer is a resounding yes, because 11 months rental is obviously being more than the 3 months. There is a continuous supply. And for that, when the tax liability or the liability to raise an invoice would occur, obviously in the contract, it will be clearly mentioned what is the rental due date. For instance, they might say 5th of the following month, 1st of the following month, 7th of the following month. Then that is the day on which the invoice should be issued. If it is not issued, does not matter. It is already there in the contract. So the invoice ought to have been issued on that day is what we need to consider. Now, how does it affect my 13 subsection 2? It affects because post the amendment, as per section 31, invoice when it should have been issued. So it is not specifying or restricting itself only to 31.2. It is open for interpretation of 31.5 as well. Hence, in case of continuous supply of service, 31.5 will become the... Am I audible? I'm still not sure.
You are audible. You are audible.
Okay. But somehow this mic is not vibrating. So it's okay. Anyway, I'll continue. If I'm not audible, just let me know. I'm struggling with
certainly,
these
certainly.
equipments. Yeah. Oh, where were we? Okay. 31.5. So when the contract says it is having a due date of payment, go by the due date of payment for raising invoice. When the due date of payment is not there in the contract, then on or before making the payment, we will have to issue the invoice. So by doing this, we are actually getting back to the 13.2 itself, where the payment comes first. You have to raise you have to create a liability at that point in time. And there could also be contracts which are milestone based. So it is linked to an event. If that is the case, on or happening of that event on or before that, the invoice should have been raised. So the crux that we need to take to 13.2 is that it could be a continuous supply of service. It could be a discrete supply of service. If it is a discrete supply of service, within 30 days or 45 days, as the case may be, invoice should have been raised. If it is a continuous supply of service, 31.5 will kick in, and accordingly, time of supply needs to be assessed. But in all the cases, the bottom line still remains that if money is received in advance, then on that money, GST will be liable. So at this point, I want to bring up this issue with respect to advances. Now, will the money that is received as a mobilization advance will be treated as an amount which is considered to be an advance? Multiple forums, multiple interpretations are going on. So my view still is that when mobilization advance is given, and there are instances where I have seen mobilization advances with interest are also being taken. For example, I am doing a project for Haryana Urban Development Agency, HUDA. So what they are doing is Haryana Urban Development Authority. I am doing it for them. They are giving me a 10 crore advance. And for the 10 crore advance, I am paying them 11% interest. We have had instances where department has said the 10 crore advance given is in the nature of an advance receipt for the service. But when there is a separate consideration assigned to it and it is under a separate contract, how can that become an advance for this transaction? Remains to be seen. But if there is no such clear demarcation of advance received, then obviously 13.2 will attract, and 13.2 will make us liable to pay GST on such transactions. Now quickly on to the second element, which is with respect to the excess money that is received. In many cases, we will come across this, especially in case of services. In case of goods as well, it is possible in certain industries. And in case of goods, since there is no concept of payment of GST on advances post 15th November 2017, I'm not dwelling it there. I'm dealing with it in services alone. When I receive payment for my services, if I receive excess, there is a liability to pay GST on that, because it is considered to be an advance, provided it comes within the category of minor excess, as it was called in service tax. The minor excess is up to rupees 1,000. So if it is going to come within that category, yes, I will have a reprieve. I don't have to worry about paying GST on that advance. I can say that that amount I will pay, or whenever that is being offset against an invoice on which the tax is being paid, that invoice date will be the time of supply. So advances up to rupees 1,000 or excess payments up to rupees 1,000 should ideally not bother us with respect to time of supply and make us run helter-skelter for making the payment of tax in advance. So these are the two critical elements with respect to 13 subsection 2, as well as read with the 12 subsection 2, the counterpart, which is for the purpose of goods. Now on to the explanations, which are integral part of 12 subsection 2, which also create an element of discussion. In case of goods, again, similar to services, the supply shall be deemed to have been made to the extent it is covered by the invoice, and which is the reason why they go on saying that the invoice can be raised on or before removal. Now, practically, where we are hit by this is without even understanding the implication of this provision, some of the officers will we will see, or we may have already encountered, saying that you raised invoice on 31st of March, but the goods are being moved only on 15th of April. So there is a delay, because of which I doubt that the transaction may not be right. I am trying to think that there is a illegal transaction here. Now, what I am not able to understand is I have disclosed the tax even beforehand, and the time of supply provisions very clearly tells that, yes, I am entitled to do that. And to the extent I have raised an invoice, it is considered to be supplied. And going by that, if the movement happens after that, should the officer really object? I don't see any reason. The tax has already reached the government. Now, this gives rise another important question, or an interesting question, where my contract for supply is on X my works terms. In other words, I will make an invoice and I will keep the goods outside my factory. That's all. Transportation is your problem, is what I tell to my customer. So who needs to take the goods from my premises onwards? It is on the customer. He needs to move it. He needs to take it to his premises. Now, this being said, I raise an invoice on 31st March and I keep the goods at my factory gate. Now, he is arranging a vehicle on, let's say, 1st of April. The goods are moved to his premises only by 3rd of April. The key question is, can I avail input tax credit in the month of March itself for this invoice raised on me? I subscribe to the view that, yes, I can avail. The reason being, the supply is termed to be completed. When the supply is complete, I do not violate any conditions of section 16(2). Then Have I received it? Yes, I am entitled to receive it. I can send it anytime I can send a transporter to pick up the goods and bring it. And the responsibility of my seller has actually gotten over the moment he keeps it outside his factory. Hence, I become entitled to input tax credit for the month of March itself, is my view. But still, I am seeing in some of the places notices are being given by comparing the month-end invoices with the date on which the e-way bills are raised for those invoices, comparing or checking that with the ITC availment of the customer and questioning the ITC availment of the customer, saying, though the invoice is dated 31st March, the movement commenced only in April. How can you avail the credit in the month of March? But when the contract is for X, my works, I am still entitled to take the full input tax credit, is my view. So this is a practical run-in that I have had with this explanation, coupled with, of course, the ITC provisions. And then the date of payment, which is explained here, we will momentarily look at it, but more in services. And I don't think we'll be able to look at it today in case of services. We will have a look at it in the next week discussion. In case of goods or services, what is the date on which it is considered that I have received the payment of money? It is the date of entry in my books or date on which it is credited to the bank account, whichever is earlier. So whether we do a reactive account or preemptive accounting depends upon our accountant's capability. But if it hits the bank account first, that is the date on which it is considered to be received. If it is passed as an entry in my books first and then only it hits the bank account, then my date of entry in my books of accounts is considered to be the date on which I had received the payment. So I think that is where I will put a pause today and look at the chat box for any questions. Okay. The first question from Venuji, yes, I have taken 11 months rent is continuous supply. Yes, sir. 11 different supplies in one contract. It is very difficult to think 11 different supplies in one contract. I don't think so. It is still 11 months rent is a continuous supply. One continuous contract is my view on that. What is the time of supply for corporate guarantee given? Now, this is the post 26th October syndrome. Now, 26th October 2023, when they said that the time of supply, the corporate guarantee actually becomes liable. Now, there is no specific time of supply which is assigned to this. So how do I go about it? We need to go about it in the form of services. Now, in case of services also, the Rule 28 second proviso saving is removed by saying that the 1% method has to be adopted. So I am of the view that whenever the grant of such guarantee happens, that is considered to be the time when the service is completed. Now, can I say it is completed? I'm leaving it open because legally I also need to explore. But the moment I give you the guarantee, which is part of your say loan taking process or your part of your financial thing, again it is gone.
Sir, again your voice has dropped.
Yeah, I can see that this time I saw the mic, so that's why I stopped.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Now I
Now
can.
audible.
Okay. Shit, where were we?
The corporate guarantee second proviso.
In case of corporate guarantee, the guarantee is given by me. Now, should I consider from, let's say it is for a 5-year term loan. I cannot say that only on the completion of the 5-year term loan, the service is completed. The service is completed the moment I stand as guarantee or I stand on behalf of that person when he is making an application. So that is the time it gets completed. Hence, we need to go by that logic and pay the GST. There is another question which will obviously follow. Should I pay on a yearly basis? Should I pay for the term of the loan? I am of the view that it is one guarantee that is given. If the term is going to be 5 years, then I need to pay only once. There is no question of paying it on a yearly basis or breaking it into periods. The next question that I can see again from Venu is that section 7 includes agree to provide. Can we not say advance is also a supply? Okay. Sir, agree to provide is succeeded by actual provision. So hence I feel we should not segregate it in a contract as to two separate things. And agreeing to provide if it results in an invoice, then to ensure that the levy is sustained, I think they have given that words agree to provide. So technically speaking, if I agree to provide and I do not provide, can I raise a advance receipt voucher for the advance received and refund voucher and 54(8)? I feel that is the appropriate route, because the levy lacks substance. If I go by the logic of saying that when it is agreed to provide also I need to raise an invoice, then what will happen is every such invoice we need to raise a credit note. Then there is no need for something called as advance receipt voucher or a refund voucher. I am trying to interpret it, one, to my advantage, and two, to think that mere receipt of money as advance cannot become a scenario for levy. Receipt of money is different. Agreeing to provide is a different aspect, is what I wanted to conclude on that. In this, in the case of this example where the advance is returned, should I apply for refund only or adjust? Yeah, I have already addressed that by saying that yes, I can adjust. If I do not have any right to adjust, yes, I can go for this refund.
Sir, sorry to interrupt here.
No issue.
When we say adjust, are we saying it in a practical manner or legally such adjustment is permitted?
Sir, legally such adjustment is permitted, is my view. The reason being, how do I report my refund voucher? Now, is this a scenario under 39(9) in the case of omissions or inclusions? No, sir. I don't think it is under 39(9). I can
Correct.
report it as a tax that is paid in excess, which I can adjust. It is not covered by 39(9), is my view.
Yeah, so 12, table 12 of R1 doesn't ask for refund voucher. It is only advances adjusted.
You are talking
So-
about the list of vouchers, the list of documents.
Documents.
Yeah.
So, since it is not an adjustment, sorry, I think 11, it's
Hmm.
not an adjustment. Legally, I think we should only go for a refund. However, practically, it is both are one and the same. I am paying lower tax or paying tax and collecting. Was of my view.
I subscribe to this view only to the extent that there is an objection from the officer only for 39(9). The 39(9) does not get hindered. There is no objection from the officer. Hence, we are conveniently making use of 39(9). For instance, before next November, if I am able to adjust, he is not even questioning me.
Correct.
So I am able to adjust. If I am not able to adjust at all, then I don't have an option but to go for refund. Your point is that in any case, even if you are not, even if you are able to adjust, you should not adjust, is what you are coming up with.
Correct. Exactly.
Agreed, sir. In that case, yes, that point of view can also be taken. I am taking 39(9) as a comfortable refuge for me.
Right. Got it.
Is corporate guarantee a continuous supply of service? It is a contract through which I say that I'm going to stand as guarantee for this amount. Now, what is the period? Yes, that will bring that into picture. But my view, corporate guarantee, I still feel is an one-time event. It doesn't happen as a continuous supply, because as I said earlier, the loan term does not alter the guarantee that I am standing for. Yes, I think that is all with respect to the questions that I had there.
Sir, one
Yeah, I think-
question.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, yeah, Vinod,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
please ask. I was just telling the members of any question, they can also unmute themselves and ask.
Yeah. So one question, though
Yes, sir.
briefly we discussed. Let's say this is with regards to input tax credit vis-a-vis time of supply. The insurance contract I have undertaken from 1st Jan 24 to 31st December 24. Now, but to ensure, okay, and I have made the payment in the month of Jan. Now, to substantiate that I have received goods and services to claim input tax credit, if the time of supply itself is indicating 1st Jan as the time of supply, can that be a substantive evidence stating that the receipt of service happened? Though there is an obligation from the service provider to provide me insurance or maintenance whole of the year. Am I audible? I am unable to hear anyone. Arupji, I am there.
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. So my question was clear, Arupji.
Yes.
Question is clear.
Shankar sir.
My mic
Yeah.
is gone, I think, again. Hello.
Now we can hear you,
Yeah,
sir.
okay. This is a same point. I think we had already had a discussion in the group as well, wherein to the extent of from the point of view of time of supply, to the extent I raise an invoice, the explanation which follows 13.2, the supply shall be deemed to have been made to the extent it is covered by the invoice, or as the case may be by the payment, is mentioned for the purpose of class A and B only. That is only for the purpose of 13.2 A and B. Now, can I interpret it for the purpose of section 16? I have a different question for section 16 itself by saying that what is the date appointed as by which it is received? So take for instance, 1st January to 31st December insurance I have taken, or AMC I have taken. How can or when can the department say that I am entitled to say that I have received the service in full only on 31st of December? If that is going to be the case, it creates another anomaly or a situation which is, can I avail the ITC in next January when I have actually received the invoice in this January, which is beyond the 30th of November? Now, people might say 37A has come, we can make use of that to do that. I don't think 37A, the intention was bringing 37A was to postpone the credits. So for services, to the extent it is covered by an invoice, it is deemed to be completed to that extent, and based on that, we can avail input tax credit, is my view.
So just to, as a nutshell, if the supplier is made to believe that the supply happened, so from the supplier point, if the supply is complete, then the recipient point, the receipt also should be complete. Like, I would still say that if 1st January is the obligation of supply, the 1st January should be treated as obligation of receipt.
Correct. And if this is not done, or if this is going to be challenged by the department, this will precipitate into a different problem altogether, because any contract which is running for a period, but the invoice is raised in advance, will they go on saying this? And this will create a huge issue in terms of, one, ITC availment, and second, nobody will be able to conclude what is the actual date of receipt of service unless the contract concludes.
We actually had a similar matter in case of audit by Central Tax.
Yeah.
So one ground we have taken is that used or intended to be used, that word is used.
Correct.
Right. And the basic purpose of that is that whether I'm availing the service at that point of time, or what is happening in this kind of ANC or insurance is the obligation of the supplier to supply the service, that is getting only deferred. But once he's raising the invoice and collecting the money from me, effectively I've received the service. Only thing is that the obligation is getting stretched over that one year period.
Yes.
That's the argument that we had taken, and because of which they had dropped. But one main argument that we had thought is that it's the word used that used or intended to be used. So even if I'm not using it within that particular financial year, that does not debar me from availing the credit.
Valid. I never thought for services I'll be using this used or intended to be used formula, but at least, I mean, those wordings, because those wordings are very powerful from a excise regime comparison to GST.
Yeah.
That is where I felt it is more useful for goods, especially capital goods. I need not wait to put to use. I can take the
That was the
ITC
context. Yes, right. That was the context.
For services, it was completely out of equation for me, but made relevant. So I'll make use of that.
Yes.
Sir, shall I tell that?
Yeah,
Arun,
please, sir, please. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, that is intended use and then receipt. Both are different contexts, sir. Intended to be used, that is intentionally for the goods mainly it will come into effect, sir. But here there should be actual receipt. So otherwise the section 2B will not be possible, sir. The intended means See, you have received the goods inside the factory and then you are keeping it. You will be using it after a 3-month period. So for that, to cover that situation only, if they were left out with only use, then the department will say, show me the production of the manufacturing good where these goods have gone into. To avoid the situation only, that intended word is used there. But the receipt, there should be a receipt prior to intended for use. So whenever the service is received only, we can take the ITC. That is what, because there is an agreement, we cannot say that the service has been provided or we have received the service. That if that argument is taken, then, for example, some of the other contracts where we can take the ITC for the services, we can take in the initial period itself, sir. So I think the receipt of service is very, very important. There is a difference between receipt of service and then use or intended to be used as given in section 15(1), sir. This
Okay,
is my
sir.
view.
Where is the, understood, sir. Where is the legal backing for receipt of service, sir? Do we have a definition for receipt of service?
No, that is not there. That is also another thing that we
Exactly.
are taking.
So, Mr. Paul Tangam, sir, all I am trying to tell is, we are able to find the difference. Agreed. I'm able to appreciate the difference between what is receipt of service vis-a-vis used or intended to be used. But I feel legally there is no need. Had they felt the need, it is high time that they should come up with a definition of what is receipt of service. And I am very doubtful. How do we conclude that some service is considered to be received only when the contract is over? Is that the way that we are going to go? Then multiple year insurances, multiple year warranties, for that example. Even I get goods with manufacturer's warranty. So will I go and tell the manufacturer or the user not to avail the credit till the warranty period is over? I'm not sure. If we start thinking like that, I think services, we can never say when it is complete. Moment invoice is kept as a controlling factor, because from the government perspective, they are collecting tax, they are letting us take ITC of it. So the moment you are collecting tax, why can't you allow me to take ITC? That is why they specifically debar us from taking ITC on advances. And which is why 11A, we are not reporting party-wise advance, we are reporting only place of supply-wise advance. The reason being, I don't want that to be even by mistake passed on to my customer to take as ITC. But the moment the levy happens, I report it as B2B. It is entitled for ITC by the other person. So hence, I am of the view, for services, though we appreciate that there is a difference between receipt and used or intended to be used, there is no legal need for it. And as it stands today, that is only an artificial thing created by the department. I saw it, Arup, in case of Karnataka. I am still not able to answer to that officer, but maybe I will use this. I am still not convinced with this point itself. So I'm thinking, why should I answer that point?
Right. No, and another thing they were asking, the department was asking, that what happens if tomorrow you go ahead and cancel the agreement? So I said that in that case, if I say cancel the agreement, then, I can always reverse the credit, no, for the remaining period.
No, there are two things, no. When I cancel the credit, cancel the arrangement, one, you need to see the arrangement is one thing. And second, if 34(2) or 34(1) and 2, the time limit expires, there is no way that fellow can give me a credit note.
No.
So your revenue is saved. And there are only two scenarios prescribed under, I think, Circular 188, where the B2C or anybody can take refund of it who has suffered.
Yeah.
In which the insurance is there, but that is one-time premium policy is only covered there.
Yeah.
So still the government is at the beneficial scenario where or rather I would say there is a revenue neutral scenario. Tax paid to the government has been only availed as ITC.
Yes. So I think with this, it's almost 9:55. So I would request Arpit ji to do the honors of giving a vote of thanks. Arpit ji.
Thank you, Rudy, for giving
Yes.
this opportunity, and thank you, Shankarji, for such an enlightening session and the discussion we had about the services being received and to what extent the supply has been made and whether advances can be treated as supplier to be made. And I guess we would be continuing this session on next Saturday also. And I would request you to cover the scenario since we have discussed on the part of whether advances received is a supply or not. The proviso to section 50, which provides for levy of interest. and it provides that where the supply made has been declared in the return for the same month, then the interest has to be given on the net cash portion. So let's take a scenario wherein I have received an advance in the month of November 2022, but I did not pay the tax in 3B. I paid the tax on advance in March 2023, but the invoice for the supply was issued in April 2023, wherein it was reflected in the return for the same month. Now, since proviso to section 50 subsection 1 uses the term where the supply made has been reflected in the return for the same month. So even if the advances have been shown, tax on advances have been paid belatedly, but since the invoice has been reflected in the same month in the return, whether at all interest would be payable on the gross basis or the net basis, because this term made supply has been used numerous times in the Act. So what is the scope vis-a-vis the time of supply of the supply being made? It's a very important question which was discussed today, and in my opinion, the discussion which we had on various issues relating to time of supply were enlightening. And as always, I say that we have the luminaries in the GST in this group, and whenever they take the onus upon them to discuss and deliberate on the subject, it's always a pleasure to listen and a memorable thing to remember on various issues. So thank you very much for giving the time on the subject, and we look forward for the session in the next week.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much everyone for joining in, and we are looking forward to meet on the next week. And thanks for all your lovely messages. Why we are not starting with the SMS. So that's really encouraging to all of us.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, Shankar Nayanaji, and thank you, Venuji and Arpitji. So over to you, Venuji, for the final conclusive remarks.
There is nothing conclusion under GST, and every time the new things come up, and like including you have thrown a line of intended to be used can be here, and I have to rethink on continuous supply of service vis-a-vis goods. So there are many things. It's actually an opportunity for all of us. Just be there 1 hour and relook at the same subject. It's not that no one knows. Everyone here knows this provisos, but an opportunity again, like through Shankar sir, now relook at all these things. Thank you, and definitely yes, wonderful session. Thank you, Shankar sir.
So thank you, everyone. So we'll close the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you.